on.
Equal pay for an equal job. It seems as though, as we look at this 70 cents on the dollar statistic, or 77 cents on the dollar statistic for women, this will be a pretty topical issue as we head into November.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very, very important issue, and thank you so much for inviting me. Listen, as we've discussed previously, equal pay affects a large number of women, obviously, but also their families. And, gender disparities are a non-economic barrier. And just like other non-economic barrier, it distorts the economy. And so just as a basis of good economic policy, we should not have these types of non-economic factors distorting what would otherwise be pay for equal work.
One of the amazing things to me, however, is a study that was pointed out by my colleague Mike McKee here from the St. Louis Fed, which actually looked at jobs that women do compared to jobs that men are doing, and it was very much on a like-by-like basis, oranges to oranges, apples to apples. And what it actually found is that there is not as big a disparity as the numbers we're getting from the administration and from the U.S. Labor Department would suggest. In fact, the St. Louis Fed concluded that there was actually only a 3.6% difference in terms of the wage gap between men and women. What is it, Mike, that the St. Louis Fed is looking at that the White House is not?
Well, as you can see by those numbers there are various ways to measure it, and that's the issue. If you just look at women's wages, hourly wages versus men's hourly wages on a gross basis, you get that 77 cents on the dollar. But if you look at if you control for the occupations that men and women are in, and you compare women and men who have the same job,
which logically you would think they would do anyway,
and the same education, etc., then you end up with that 5% figure. The 3.6% figure is when you also add in benefits, because there is evidence that women choose jobs in many cases because of the benefits. They might want more child care help, they might want more maternity leave, those things. And when you add that all together, that's what the researchers found. It can come down to 3.6%, which means it's a very complicated issue in trying to figure out how you address this.
Sabrina, are we oversimplifying this?
No, not at all. In fact, this is not the only study to have shown this. I mean, the Department of Labor did its own research a number of years ago that came up with the same thing. Economist June O'Neill has done many studies that show the same thing. Even the sort of liberal American Association of University Women has done a similar study, also finding that the wage gap is much smaller than is repeatedly stated by the president, by Democratic lawmakers, and by activists. So I think it's really important, if we want to try to shrink the pay gap even more, or to more importantly help women get what they want in terms of a work-life family balance, we need to have an honest conversation about what the real numbers are.
Perhaps I should have rephrased that. In other words, is the administration oversimplifying it by just saying women are making 77 cents on the dollar as opposed to looking at what job a woman is doing, Sabrina?
Yeah, and in fact, that's a very kind way of saying it. What they're doing is they're lying. I mean, the reality is we all know that this number is overstated. We all know that the pay gap is far smaller than what they say, and we know the reason. The reason is that men and women are different. They choose different majors in college, and the reality is that if you go into nursing, it pays less than petroleum engineering. Women choose to take more time out of the workplace, and that has an effect on their salaries. But if you look at how women in their early 20s are doing compared to their male counterparts, they're making more. If you look at how women who are 35 and older without children, they're also making more than men. So the reality is that this is far oversimplified by the White House, and we should have a more honest conversation.
But it's a political issue, Karen. I mean, again, midterms on the way, and it certainly sounds good.
Listen, this is an economic issue. It's not a political issue. And, whether it's 3.5%, 4.5%, whatever the disparity is, if it's based on gender, it should not be. And it should be eliminated from the economy. It's that simple. And I think in terms of the data, as you know, President Obama is going to be signing an executive order tomorrow with regard to federal contractors and disclosure of salary data. And I think that's a very good thing. And I think it'll add more information, more factual information into the debate, and more transparency on pay practices. And look, we want greater transparency, so hopefully federal contractors will comply with that.
Mike McKee,
But
why
this is
haven't
already
we
the
heard
law.
more about the St. Louis Fed study? I mean, all I hear is 77 cents on the dollar.
This is a compilation. It's a look at various studies, and there are a lot of different studies out there. And it hasn't been a major issue in recent years, which is probably why it hasn't made the headlines. As the president brings it forward, then economists like me and other people start looking at these various studies. Both of these people are right, though. Even on a like-for-like basis, any kind of disparity is unfair and should be addressed. But because of the complexity of why you have this disparity, it makes it very hard to do. And as a political issue, it becomes very difficult because there's no easy answer to this, and probably not a legislative answer.
Transparency. Go ahead, Sabrina.
Yeah, I was going to make the point that, first of all, so that viewers know, there are already two laws on the books. The Equal Pay Act of 1963, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Lilly Ledbetter, that was passed when President Obama first came into office, further extends these laws. There's plenty of protection on the books. So I think that it's important that we mention that the Paycheck Fairness Act and these executive orders, these aren't going to actually create equal pay. They're going to pad the pockets of trial lawyers. They're going to make it a whole lot easier for women to sue if they feel that they've been discriminated. But they don't create equal pay. What's creating equal pay are businesses that are investing a lot in attracting and retaining women. There's a robust private marketplace that is saying, hey, there's all sorts of groups out there that have networking, conferences, videos, seminars, all sorts of things to help women get more money and excel in the workplace.
All right,
Look,
we're going to
just for a point of clarification, I mean, there isn't a private right of action, so this isn't about litigation. And I do think transparency is important, and economic fairness is important. And, wherever the women are, whether they're getting paid minimum wage, whether they're corporate, there should not be a gender disparity. There is. We can argue about what the percentage of that disparity is, but there is a gender disparity, and it should be corrected.